Hello, I'm Peter Eyers and you're listening to Stages, the podcast that converses with creatives about craft, career and what matters to them. Joan Carden was born in Melbourne in 1937 on the anniversary of the great composer Giuseppe Verdi's birth. After understudying June Bronhill as the Merry Widow in 1960, Joan Carden sought tuition in London, studying with her major musical influence, London-trained and based West Australian-born multilingual expatriate vocal coach Vida Harford. Joan Carden appeared in opera and concerts in Europe before initially joining the Australian Opera in concerts in 1970. The following year marked her stage debut with Australian Opera as Liu in Turandot and Marguerite in Faust. After much acclaim in Australia as Gilda in Rigoletto, she was invited to repeat the role at Covent Garden. Engagements ensued throughout the United Kingdom and United States. Joan Carden has sung virtually all the Mozart heroines. Her performance of Violetta in Verdi's La Traviata has been noted for the moving interpretation. Her voice in Violetta's famous aria is on the soundtrack of the film Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Joan Carden is engaging grace and charm. She reflects warmly on a career that has not only brought audiences great joy, but also rewarded her in the ability to gift the art of song. I was delighted to learn that, you, like me, you are a great canine fan.
Oh, dog man. Actually, I think I am a dog.
Really? In a previous life?
Yes, I speak dog.
What's the language of dog?
Look, I don't have to say anything.
Right.
They look at me and they know me. And I've seen dogs go, oh, and tear over to me. And I said, I smell right.
Yeah. You're a dog whisperer.
I am a dog whisperer.
So why are dogs man's best friend?
I don't know. I think there's an element of subservience.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I mean, they are descended from wolves.
Yeah. So they like that. They like being part of a pack or a family.
Well, that's it, isn't it?
And a leader.
You're quite right. That is I think that's probably the nub of it.
Did you have dogs all your life? Did you have them as a girl? No.
My first dog was a Dachshund called Gussie, who was originally, when we saw her, called Gutsy, for obvious reasons.
Big appetite. Big appetite.
Yes, and she was 4 months old, and we were driving up north in England to visit some friends of Bill's in Newcastle, and pulled into Sline Lodge outside of Lancaster. And as we were talking to the proprietors, we heard nick, 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 and there were the two Daxies, Mum and Whiskey, the mother, and the little baby, Oh, and I started to cry. Yeah. I just fell in love with that puppy. And I said, do you think we could possibly adopt her? And they had discussed it with their children, I don't know why, and their children said yes.
Wow.
So that ruined the week away because I couldn't wait to get back there.
Yeah.
And we brought her back, and she was my little companion. She was my first baby.
Yeah. And did you have Dachshunds all through?
No. I had to leave Gussie in England when we came to Australia because there was a, what was it called? Rabies scare.
All right.
In England.
Yep.
You couldn't take any dogs out. Nearly killed me. But I found the most wonderful home. A week before, I was getting frantic and thinking, maybe I can smuggle her in a bag onto the plane. I was desperate. And I took her out, took my baby, Anna was 10 months, took her out to where we used to live in Hertfordshire to see the baby clinic there. And the lady who ran it, one of her two dogs had died the previous week, and the other one was pining, and she took it. And we remained friends for that lady's life till she died last year at 99.
Wow. That's impressive.
And I used to, when I would go to England, I would stay with her. So we made a wonderful friendship.
All through
the dog.
passion for dogs.
Yes.
Yeah.
And her husband, who had been a Navy man in the Merchant Navy, Stephen, he said, just to make her feel better, I feed her tall dog stories. Isn't that sweet?
Very punny.
Yes, yes.
So Joan Marilyn Carden, you were born in Melbourne, an only child.
Yes. But my mother was pregnant when I was 18 months old, and she lost that baby.
Right.
And so I never had my sibling. But I was meant to have one.
Did you have cousins?
Yes,
around your
very
age?
close cousins. My mother's younger sister Doris lived in the Dandenongs, and we had a weekend house in Ferntree Gully, and we used to go up there, and they used to visit every weekend. So the routine was we would go to the interval at the Adelphi, where Dad ran the shop that was attached to the building, and we lived behind it, and the interval would be cleared up, and the car would have been packed, and we would set off to Ferntree Gully via the chip shop at the fish and chip shop at Box Hill, and then I would have that and fall asleep and be carried in to the little timber house that we had on 3/4 of an acre, which ended up years later to be a, would you believe, a nursing home. And every weekend and every Christmas and every school holiday, that's where I spent it. And it was very healthy. And I've actually, until my heart problems, I've been a very healthy person.
Oh.
Because my girls always say, we don't remember you missing any performances through a cold, Mum.
Mm.
So, I have been healthy, and I think it was that early healthy life, climbing trees with the other boys, because there were only boys to play with.
I don't think the heart condition even interrupted your performance career at times, did it?
I thought it was a jolly nuisance.
It was a story. You couldn't wait to get back on stage after a particular heart episode.
Well, I thought, I was back singing Lou 10 weeks after the heart attack. Well, actually, 10 weeks after the heart attack.
Had the doctors approved that, or you saw?
I didn't tell them.
Right.
It's my business.
Were the opera company management a bit concerned?
Oh, yeah, they were great. Moffat was fantastic. And he eased me back in by putting me in a role that I knew. But it was the weirdest experience imaginable. Because I actually had this was after the bypass, and I'd had my sternum sawed open, and this bone had swelled, and so now when I turn my head, the sinews scrape over it, which they didn't before, so there was a hollow.
So were you concerned that the operation might have affected your voice?
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah.
I couldn't wait. When I came to, I was starting to hum, because I thought, is it still there?
Yeah.
Oh, it was I cannot tell you how terrifying it was.
So 10 weeks later, are you still in pain? Because your bones are still knitting together, aren't they? And
yes.
And
yes.
perhaps even some bruising.
Well, what happened was it was a really fine line, and then it went keloid, which upset me terribly, and I could not stand anything on it. Now you can hardly see it.
Right. But as far as clothing or costume on the scar, you couldn't stand.
I had to cover the scar by trying to wear a locket or something, or a necklace, but I couldn't stand it on the actual wound. It just made me feel terrible.
And you're very self-conscious of the sight of it as well, aren't you, I guess?
Oh, very.
Because as a performer, you're quite vulnerable.
And the lovely man who made the costumes, John Papadopoulos, he used to always rave on about my décolleté. And I said, well, it ain't there anymore, dear. you've got to cover it up. We can't have any low necks anymore.
Right.
Which meant all my concert dresses couldn't be worn, and because I couldn't wear even a locket or a chain to hide it. So it was a major thing, and I remember looking in the mirror in the bathroom at the hospital and thinking, I'm just not the same person anymore. It was terrifying. And not only that, I was in a private room, and my cousin rang quite early in the morning from Melbourne. I couldn't speak. Right. I was going, oomph, oomph.
You made sounds.
And I'd seen my mother do that. She had a TIA in front of me, and she was looking so mystified because she was speaking but she couldn't. And the same thing.
So describe for me that first night back on stage, 10 weeks later.
It was actually a matinee.
Right.
And it was the most uncanny feeling because I didn't sound the same to myself. And it was like I was on my own shoulder watching myself perform. It was an out-of-body experience.
Yeah.
Terrifying. And it was Liu in Turandot. A great production, I loved it. What happened was Liu is laid on the backs of these men and they crawl off with me on their backs. And I absolutely burst into tears. Couldn't move because it had been such an effort, and that was 4 months after the surgery.
Wow. Extraordinary.
And that was the most shocking year. I was absolutely stupid. I think it was just a little bit later, about June, I made my debut as Tosca. That was my role debut, which I was very lucky to have John Copley really looking after me, and the VSO did too. They were wonderful. And he said, no, you only do what you have to do. He said, I know you know it. So that all worked out well, and was the wonderful John Wegner as the Baron Sculptor. And he was simply terrifying as Sculptor. And he used to, and he was very athletic, he used to stride across the stage, and I used to think, I hope he remembers his acting. And this isn't real. And he really manhandled me quite roughly, and I was very delicate. But he got into the mood of it. It was a wonderful performer.
Well, that's the powerful thing in opera too, isn't it? When the physicality can match the voice. When the singer looks like the character.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And he was Sculptor. Oh, so was John Shaw, to the life. And I did quite a lot of performances with John Shaw. That was a wonderful experience. But then I very foolishly took on a big role debut as Médée in French, with reams of French dialogue. And it all went absolutely swimmingly up to the dress rehearsal, and I had a most glowing report from the French coach, Marie-Claire, saying, that she'd been gobsmacked by my performance. And on the opening night, exhaustion hit me. And I went blank. I'm standing in the wings and I thought, I can't remember a single word of that first speech. So I said to Kath Dad, who was the stage manager, can I see you score? Didn't have much, and I said, have you got glasses? No. I couldn't read the thing. So I went on and I thought, it'll come to me. It'll come to me, won't it? But it didn't.
But your body is still repairing itself, I guess.
It was.
Yeah.
And I had gone too far.
Yeah.
And Richard Bonning was conducting,
right.
And he's got and all that's happening in the accompaniment is diddle, diddle, diddle in the orchestra, and he's looking at me with his eyes like saucers. And I'm going wide-eyed at him as if to say, can't remember a thing. And there was just silence. and diddle 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 in the orchestra. I thought I'd die. Not a word would come to me.
So how'd you get out of it?
I just looked dramatic,
And
as if I was supposed to be doing it.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? If the audience don't know, well,
No.
I guess some of them might know the score or whatever, but if something does go
I
wrong
didn't
on
come out of
stage-
character for a second.
Yeah, great.
But nobody knew what was going on inside me. And I thought, and I said to Richard afterwards, I thought I was going to die. I don't know how he managed, I really don't. Anyway, and of course, what happens after that is you redouble your efforts to be effective. But that was the biggest shock of my career, I can tell you.
Well, thank goodness for all that country air and tree climbing
Yes.
in your youth, too.
Yes, I thought you can't keep us goodies.
Give it that strength. You said your dad worked at the Astor. Was that a cinema?
It was the Adelphi.
Adelphi, I beg your pardon. Yeah.
It had been the Jubilee roller skating rink, and his uncle, who was a Melbourne City Councillor, George Frederick Carden, he bought it and converted it into a cinema, and it was Art Deco, very beautiful,
Gorgeous.
absolutely gorgeous, and the ceiling is still the same. I went and saw it a few years ago, and I saw the door was open, so I went in, and this man, who was obviously the manager, said, "Oh, can I help you?" And I told him what my connection was. And he said, "Oh, I've got a whole file on you." And he took me into his office, and sure enough, he had a file on me and on my great uncle, and the history of our connection with that cinema. So it was the Adelphi Theatre. And then it became the San Remo Ballroom.
Did you spend much time at the cinema?
I was there from my pram. I was looked after by the ushers while Mum and Dad worked.
So you saw a bit of film, I guess.
I must have.
Yes.
And when the theatre was empty, I used to go up on the stage, and there was a microphone on a stand, which was not working, but I stood in front of it. I didn't sing because I was terribly shy, but I used to tell stories, and the usher used to go and say to Dad, "Come and see Joan, she's telling stories in the auditorium that I made up."
Because you're looking out into an auditorium full
absolutely
of
empty.
chairs, but empty.
Yes.
But there's something perhaps about seeing all of those films
Yes,
that's through osmosis.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Getting you to perform.
When I did my audition when I was 22, I think, for The Merry Widow, I did that at the Tivoli Theatre, and as I walked across the stage to sing, I thought, "Oh, I've come home." It was the most uncanny feeling. I felt as if I belonged there. So I was nervous, but not as much as I might have been. And that was the start of the love affair with the theatre.
Merry Widow, and you were understudying June Bromhill.
Yes, well, first of all, I was the chorus. Then I became a grisette. Do, 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 clo, clo, frou, frou. Yeah, Clo Clo. Oh, it's the last one. And then she would sing, Et moi. Oh, it was the Gazettes of Paris greet you, and we're very proud when we're very pleased to meet you. Lo, lo, do, do, shoo, shoo, frou, frou, clo, clo, Margot.
So we all have to start somewhere. You started in the chorus.
Yes, and then I was promoted to a grisette, and then I became June's understudy.
I guess you always had your eye, though, on the big prize.
No.
No? You
No.
content to be a chorus person?
It was a progression that had nothing to do with ambition.
Right.
I just wanted to be better.
Yeah.
That was my thing. I knew I had shortcomings and I wanted to work on them. Which is why I was offered a role by Garnet Carroll in the next thing. What was it? I think it was the Pajama Game. And I said, no, I'm going overseas to learn singing from Vida Harford, which I did, because Raymond Nilsson, who had been the Camille, and he had his own costume for in Carmen, or Don José, yeah, and he was learning from Vida Harford, and he said, she's a most wonderful musician. She hails from Perth, Western Australia, and what she doesn't know about music isn't worth knowing. So I wrote to her, and she said, yes, come and let me hear you. So I did. I got off the ship. With my two girlfriends, we got off at Southampton. We went to the Overseas Visitors Club in Earl's Court, and we shared a room, the three of us, with a fourth person. And then we found a nice little flat above a villa, a humble villa in North Ken, Labour Grove. And we lived there, and I commuted from there to have lessons with Vida Harford. First of all, she was in Regent's Park, right opposite the park and the zoo, and that's where I met Cliff Grant, who is still my friend and lives 10 minutes away.
Fabulous.
And he did those two paintings.
Gorgeous. The relationship with Vida was over several decades, wasn't it?
Yes. She was my mentor-trice.
Right.
Definitely. She just taught me everything that was important. And although, see, when I went to her, I had always sounded as if I'd had singing lessons before I had any. And my first teacher was, I had a piano teacher who used to teach me little things. She was Miss Power. Then I had this lovely lady, Mrs. Molly Orton, who used to sing herself, and she was really kind to me, and she really understood my very nervous nature, and she really nurtured that. And then I went to the, Scheft piano, which that was taught in Allen's in Collins Street. That was hopeless, and really that was just almost playing by ear. And then I started singing lessons with wonderful Thea Phillips, who was a
Wagnerian soprano.
English Wagnerian soprano. Huge woman, gorgeous.
So a big voice too.
Yes, yeah. And a beautiful, beautiful, mellifluous voice. And she ended up singing the role of Praskovia in Merry Widow. That Merry Widow I was in, which is a non-singing role, and she acted the role, and it was a spoof, and it so depressed her that she committed suicide.
That she couldn't sing anymore, or
no, because she was given a role that really was.
Right.
She didn't. It was a spoof role,
yeah.
And she had been a dignified person.
Right.
And I remember the night before, she committed suicide at a matinee, before a matinee. And she had said with a group of people standing around the corridor, and she said, "Oh, Joan has always been my very good friend." She was saying goodbye.
Wow.
I didn't realise it.
Nobody realises, do they?
Lovely woman.
Yeah.
And next day, Ray Nielsen said to me, "Now there's going to be an announcement at the end of the show, and I don't want you to be upset." So I'm standing in the finale, and I've got my arms up, and we've just sung the thing, and I thought, who's missing? And I looked up. It's Thea. And then they made the announcement that the stage manager, Ivan, had gone over to see why she lived in a hotel opposite the theatre. And he went over to see why she hadn't turned up, and she was dead. She'd taken an overdose of pills.
Very sad. Very sad.
And she was buried at Kinsellers, I think it was called, in, what's that square where...
Taylor Square.
Taylor Square,
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so we all attended that, and everybody was just devastated because she was so well loved and respected, but she couldn't feel that. And she did have a drinking problem, so she was married to a man who worked in the music department at Allen's, and he arranged, she lived in Anzac Road, Warrandyte, and that was because it was away from where there were any hotels or she could get drink.
Yeah, geographically removed.
Yeah.
So singing teachers can give us technique and
Yes.
provide us with the skill to perform.
Yes.
I imagine they also provide a psychological support as well.
Some do. Vida didn't.
Right.
Not once in the whole of my years with Vida Harford did she ever say she was pleased with anything I did.
Really?
Not once.
So not necessarily any encouragement or...
I don't know whether she thought I might soft pedal if she told me that,
Yeah.
but I could have done with it. I needed that.
Well,
that
all performers
That
need it,
was
don't
a
they?
psychological shortcoming on her part, that she didn't realise that. Well, when I've done the little bit of teaching that I have, I make sure that I balance positives and negatives.
Was Vida a parent?
Yes,
Oh, she said
very
she had
tough
children.
parent.
Yeah, right.
And I'm friends with her son to this day, Hilary. He was named after the Hilary term at Cambridge, and he played the clarinet, but he became an expert in Arabic,
Right.
and then he taught at a school, but he never was a professional performer.
Right.
Well, his father, of course, Eric Waugh, was the the assistant head of music at the BBC, and he was also a censor during the war. And Vida used to drive flipping ambulances in the war, and she was a little woman. Somewhere I've got a photo. I'll go and get it. That's Eric and Vida.
Right.
Outside the house of 7 Ordnance Hill, St John's Wood.
And she's got a Labrador too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And before that, she used to have a black spaniel who used to sit underneath the piano and his toes go tick, 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 so she called him Ticker. And
Like a metronome.
yes, it was like a metronome. And yeah, so it's that little tiny house that she taught in the basement. So they're standing at the top of the steps. There's another steps down into the basement where the studio was.
Right.
And she used to teach John Mitchinson and Maureen Guy and Cliff and what was that woman's name? Isla Blair, who is the wife of Raymond Herrings.
Right.
And so she used to teach Raymond. She coached Raymond. Most people she coached, but me she taught. And lots of Australian singers wanted to learn from Vida, having heard me, the difference that it made. Because Will Reid had conducted The Merry Widow, and we all became very good friends. And Bill did me a lot of service. He did us all. He used to conduct little seminars, and he'd bring along a recording of some symphony, and we would sit round and discuss it. And we were just the chorus from The Merry Widow.
Wow.
So, that was another fortunate thing. So, and it was through knowing Bill Reid that I met my husband, because I went round to see him when he'd conducted Don Smith and Betty Fretwell in a Verdi opera, I can't even remember which one it was, at Sadler's Wells. And I went round to see him afterwards and met my husband in the doorway. He was a friend of Bill's,
right,
and that's how I got to know him. So a few months later we married.
You don't know what's around the corner.
You don't.
So, Joan, when did you realise that you may have this magnificent instrument?
Well, it was a big learning process. I felt I was a honer, and I didn't really know what I was going to do with it. I just wanted to do the best by it. And then I think it was when I was with Vida Harford that she... Actually, for the first 2 years, she wouldn't let me tell people who taught me.
Really?
No.
Wow.
And yet, I was very good.
Yeah.
But I had no confidence, thanks to not having that nurtured. Then I went into... She allowed me to audition for Our Man in Havana, which was composed by Malcolm Williamson. And Ray Nilsson he played the part of Our Man. And everybody in it, all the casting, they all looked very like the characters who played the roles in the film.
Wow.
And Ray Herrings was the chief of police. And Colin Davis's wife, April Cantelow, she was Our Man's daughter. And of course, it's a wonderful story, as you know, that he sells vacuum cleaners, and he sends these plans of vacuum cleaners to the spy agency in England and tells them that it's some craft that's being built, and it's actually a vacuum cleaner. It's a wonderful story, and I had a very humble role in that. It was actually supposed to be a baritone, but Ray persuaded Malcolm to turn it into a soprano part of the duet, of the quartet. So I was the watermelon seller in the street vendors quartet, and I sang Quiere sandías, que ricas sandías, el gordo, a quien le doy el gordo, a quien le doy el gordo, and that's it. That's all I can remember. But that was 1963.
Well, that's not a bad memory.
No.
As a singing, you're singing in a number of languages.
Yes.
Is that difficult? Are you learning?
It becomes easier the more you have to do with it. I mean, at first, I remember when I first saw an opera, and it was The Magic Flute, and it was done by the Elizabethan Trust at the Palais Theatre St Kilda. What a place. And I just thought, how do they remember all those words?
Yeah.
I was to find out. You just sit and slog, and you do it over and over and over again, and at that same time you do nothing else. You spend hours concentrating on that.
On pronunciation, on the meaning
Everything,
of the word?
Everything, yes.
Do you speak any of those languages?
Not very well at all. I felt that my bugbear was the fact I started to know languages too late.
Right.
But I've sung in French, German, Italian and Russian.
Have you spent any extended time in any of those countries?
I've been. Italy probably the most. I haven't been to Russia. When I was in Germany, it was very brief, and I actually. Why did I go there? I actually went to see Simone Young conduct a performance, and we went shopping the next day. Yeah, so she was a wonderful conductor, or is a wonderful conductor.
When you arrive at those great opera houses around the world, are you given a translator to work with you?
No. See, I didn't do much of that. Most of my work has been in the English-speaking countries.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I really thoroughly enjoyed the Met tour. Oh, that was so wonderful. I mean, wonderful singers, Beverly Sills, and everybody was at the top of their profession. And my cast was, I was in Don Giovanni, and the tenor was Stuart Burrows. What a genius that man was, and he was the funniest. He actually nearly caused me to lose my voice from laughing. He would speak in this beautiful Welsh accent, you know. I laughed myself hoarse.
Yeah.
Because we travelled in a plane, the whole company, over 200 people in the plane, and we performed in 7 cities on the eastern seaboard. And Saturday afternoons was Don Giovanni, and Saturday night was Madame Butterfly. Monday was Thais with Beverly Sills.
So when you're doing a tour like that, what do you need to be considerate of as far as vocal care goes?
Oh, it's shocking.
You're
because
concerned
there
about
is
all the
nowhere
laughing.
to sing.
Yeah, and look, you're in planes. You're
And people, who was? Oh yes, I went on when I went to Miami to judge the 7th Worldwide Madame Butterfly competition. There were 14 international judges, and Moffat had been asked to do it, but he didn't want to or couldn't. So he asked me would I. Well, I had to give up 3 performances of Trovatore to do it. But it was so worthwhile because it was absolutely fascinating to see the standard. And one of the person who represented Australia was Cheryl Barker.
fantastic.
Yeah, so that's when I first met Cheryl. And we had about 10 days in the boiling heat in Miami, where we did all the selection, and we made the decision and decided that it would be a Russian girl called somebody Kudryavchenko, that's right, and she was lovely, big girl. So we were then taken, any judges who wanted to go were taken with them to perform. They performed, we went to Barcelona via London, stayed the night in London, then went to Barcelona, and we went to a rehearsal at the Liceu, and that was fantastic. And then we went on to Italy, where we visited, of course, because it was the Madame Butterfly competition, we visited the home of Puccini. And we arrived at his home in a little tin boat called the Chocho Sun, which had a little canopy over it, and the town band choir sang, as we arrived, sang the humming chorus.
Oh, beautiful.
And there was this big bronze statue of Puccini in the town square. And then we went to his house, and I touched the piano on which he composed Bohème.
That's pretty impressive.
And there was, on the wall inside, there was this big memorial, one to him in stone and one to his sister. And just standing there, drinking that in, was the most wonderful experience. And I've always been connected to his, not to the man, but to the music. Mm. And I thought that he wrote so wonderfully for the voice. Whereas, Verdi puts a lot of stress on you. For instance, in the role of Violetta, she starts, instead of starting low, when your voice is low at the start, you start high, and then you get to the end, and you've got to be careful that you haven't worn out the bottom of your voice. You've still got some oomph and some ring in the bottom of your voice. So it's really quite a journey from beginning to end to keep thinking, now I mustn't settle down, I mustn't sing too high and I mustn't sing too low. I've got to sing in the middle, the tessitura in the middle, so that by the time I get to the end, I've got some, patina on the voice.
You're a vocal athlete, really, aren't you?
Well, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Olympian.
You are a vocal athlete, yes.
Yeah.
And as I was married to a physical athlete, Bill was not only a businessman, he was an Olympic athletics coach.
Oh, great.
So, and he had two people in the Melbourne Olympics. One won the steeplechase, the other got to the semi-final, and the one who got to it was Christopher Brayshaw won it, and the runner-up, the semi-finalist, was Eric Shirley, and he was still a great friend of Bill when we had our daughter, so he's my daughter's godfather.
When you're performing, do you speak during the day? I know that some singers have complete vocal rest. They don't answer the phone.
I was paranoid about that, and my mother say, "Oh, you've got the day off. Can we go shopping?" Oh.
Yeah.
I absolutely devoted the whole day to thinking. I lived that role all day, and it helped me deal with the nerves because I always was nervous.
And staying hydrated? You're constantly sipping water?
No, not consciously, no. I'm a bit of a camel, as my mother was too. Which reminds me, I better have a drink of water. I should really wear something to remind me to drink water.
Yes, we need to. They say we should have 10 glasses a day or something.
I wouldn't have 10 glasses a week.
So, would you drink coffee then when you were singing?
Oh, no.
No, okay, because caffeine can affect the voice.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, but I used to. I had such trouble with nerves that I started to smoke. And Richard Bonning came into the green room once after I'd sung the most trying role of my life, which was Constanza in Il Seraglio. And he stood there absolutely shocked and said, "Smoking!" And I said, "Listen, Richard, it's nerve-wracking. It's like earning a living walking on a tightrope." And in the end, I had to stop it because it was actually bringing phlegm to my throat and making it much harder.
Yeah, of course.
So you fix one thing and cause another.
But what a wonderful analogy, walking on a tightrope.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it felt like.
Yeah. Am I correct in the knowledge that the first time you sang for a large audience was on Radio 3KZ?
Yes.
Was that a talent competition?
Yes, it was 3KZ Swallows P&A Parade. Right. And Phil Gibbs was the
announcer.
Yes. And I was so damn nervous I thought I was going to die. And Dad went to the chemist and got Relaxatabs for me. And I was still a bundle of nerves. I don't think it made any difference whatsoever. And he said to me, and there's a schoolgirl from Carnegie's going to sing for us. Now, what are you going to sing, Joan? I thought, I have no idea. I couldn't think. I went blank. So he showed me the script. And I read it off. By the waters of Minnetonka. Mabel somebody. Was it Nelson? Mavis Nelson, who played the organ, and Bruce somebody played a guitar, and they accompanied me. And I listened to it and I thought, it is such a boring song, and I made nothing of it. Moon dear, yes, and then they made some nice wobblies behind it.
You've sung a few times during this conversation.
Yeah.
So do you still sing daily?
Do you know what I do? I sing along with Andre Rieu.
Oh, well, you're not the only one.
I think he's the most wonderful entertainer, and I think he does so much to foster the common man's enjoyment of classical music.
Absolutely.
I admire him so much. I mean, the singing's not always absolutely fantastic, but it's very, very good.
Yeah.
It's pretty top notch, really. And one of the singers is one of the three tenors is Gary Bennett from Tasmania, who did Falstaff with me.
Oh, right. Oh. You were principal soprano with Opera Australia for 32 years,
Yes.
I think, and particularly associated with the roles of Tosca and Madame Butterfly, Puccini's. Did you have a favourite role?
Yes, I did eventually, and it's with me till today. And I can remember it, though I do not speak Russian, I can remember it word for word, and I haven't sung it for 40 years.
Really?
Yevgeny Onegin.
'Cause
I
you
fell in love with that character, and I had a couple of, actually I gave Simone Young, I lent her my 4-volume treatise on it that was written by Nabokov and had his translation, and she still hasn't given it back to me, and I bought, that was my copy, and I bought a copy for Vida Harford too. So I'm still waiting for Simone to give me back, because that is my treasure. And it is a colloquial translation as against a poetic one.
Right.
So it's verbatim, I suppose you'd say.
Well, if Simone's listening, here's your reminder to get it back to Joan.
Yes, because it is my treasure. And I don't know what it was. Well, of course, Vida spoke Russian. And I've got the sheet music for the letter scene, and she has transliterated it for me, so I have it in 3 languages.
You've sung over 50 roles, and they extend from the 18th century, all the Mozart heroines, and through to contemporary composers. Stylistically, I imagine they're all very different and require a different approach.
I think every single piece of music is different, has its own identity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's your role as the performer to investigate that.
Yes.
And do it as was intended by the composer.
And it's such a joy. It's a wonderful experience. It's like getting to know a person. You make a friend of the music. I love it. It speaks to me.
What about different spaces that you performed in, different size opera houses?
Yes.
You might be giving a concert.
Yes.
You've got to calibrate the voice, don't you, to those different
Yes, you
spaces?
do. And the clue is to hear what the resonance is like, and you adjust your performance to that. And of course, it's not always the same depending where you stand. Sometimes one part on the stage. Well, that was particularly the case in Melbourne, which was absolutely shocking when we did Don Carlos for the opening performance, and it was such a shock. And I thought, well, the audience is not really reacting to Kenny, who's out there socking it to him. And I thought, why aren't they thrilled? Well, I couldn't hear him properly.
Right.
And we had gone there to investigate it and Mrs. Massey Burnside was up the back of the empty auditorium, no seats, nothing. It was just tiered concrete. And Richard Duval was talking to her. We could hear everything they were saying on the stage, and I called out to him and he couldn't hear me from the stage. Right. So it was in the reverse.
Wow. And
in the wings, it was so reverberant, but they had to be very quiet, the huge wings, which was lovely compared with the opera house. But you just had to be so careful because the sound was better in the wings than on the stage.
Oh, dear.
And in the end, they put kind of symbols of metal like shields down the walls. Well, all that did was give it a metallic sound. And what they should have done was take out the carpet, and I actually wrote to the Premier and told him this. I said, you need to take out the carpet and put some Victorian timber floor in. That would have solved it, but it would have cost a bit.
A lot of money.
And they'd have had to close the theatre. Yeah. But it was a nightmare. And then backstage, practically speaking, the doors were not big enough to get the trolleys through that held our costumes.
Right.
And you couldn't get through if you wore a crinoline.
Wow, of course, all those considerations, yeah.
And the worst thing was, if the person in the next room changed their mind, you could hear it.
Apart from drying on stage, did you ever get up to any mischief? Were there moments of giggles on stage or anything?
Absolutely never.
Incredible focus. The relationship with the conductor is very important.
Oh, very important. And I had a particular rapport with Stuart Challenger. I mean, when I looked down into the pit and he'd have his mouth hanging open and it was just hanging on my every sound. And there was some extraordinary connection with him.
Yeah.
And I just loved him.
Gone too soon.
Oh, yes. And, of course, I sang in my debut, which was also Susie Johnson's debut as Octavian in Der Rosenkavalier it was at a time when he was dying. He was fading away in front of us, and the stress was unbelievable because we all loved him. And he'd be sitting there with his legs crossed and the jeans would be hanging off. And it was so stressful, but it also, I don't know, it seemed to heighten the atmosphere. Everybody was dead keen to do their very best. And I was having my journey as the Marschallin, and we got to I always had my idea of how I wanted to start the big trio. It's higher than that. And day after day, hour after hour, I tried, and this one day, I got it. And I looked at him, and I just burst into tears, and he did too. I said, I got it.
She's got it.
And he said, I think we'll have to stop and have a cup of tea.
Yeah, you've earned it.
But those are the irreplaceable memories. Mm. And on the opening night, the poor thing, oh God, we got to the end of the first interval, and his former, I suppose she was really a wife to him, Marilyn Shaw, marvellous singer. He used to talk about being in bed with her and their cat. They had a Siamese cat, and it was a life I couldn't have expected from him, you know.
Yeah, wow.
And so and he once said to me, I'd met this journalist, fatal journey that was, and he said, you really love him, don't you? And I said, well, yes, I do. And he just understood that.
Yeah.
And this was a conversation we had walking through the Opera House car park.
Yeah. Great.
They are wonderful friendships. There is something about music that really is a tremendous bond that you don't even have to talk about.
Yeah.
It's just so strong. Yeah. It's an intuition almost.
Yeah. Power of music.
Yeah.
How bright you are. How engaging, how exciting, how adorable, inviting, such a power I could shower with my kisses here and now. She would be well along. Fire, leave us fire, just to meet my eyes. nicht.
So viel Nonsense, I must nicht, I must take pieces.
Hähnchen, oh,
You concentrate on that, raise a teeth of your heart, and let us start with the start. Oh, let us start with the play.
you copied me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, yes, I'm a brilliant being Saxon.
This is a great for my voice.
My fingers are a bit elastic. She stole my watch away from me. How unkind.
I speak of you sincerely.
If you don't mind.
I deal with it dearly.
I will face myself silly or laughing if I only had you back. This petition cost me dearly. I dismiss myself severely, and I want respond to praise.
Tell me about a moment on stage you had with Bob Gard in the Watch duet.
Yes. Oh, God. Well, it was Fiona McConaughey's debut as Adele. And the previous lady who sang it completely differently. And suddenly, in a subsequent scene where she is dressed up as the countess, the Hungarian countess, and he's playing along, and I was thinking. Suddenly, I got absolutely distracted, and I was thinking about Fiona wearing differently her mistress's gown, and which she stole, and she was, there's a play on words about it. Anyway, Bob is twinkling his watch, and he's twinkling his watch at me, and I said, I'm supposed to say, "What a wonderful watch!" And then he says, "Oh, would you like to know what time it is?" But instead, I shocked him to the core by saying, "What a wonderful gown you are wearing." Thinking of this dialogue
Yes.
to do with the gown previously. And I thought, oh, God almighty. Shocked myself out of it. And he said, so he says, "Would you like to know what time?" The poor man, he didn't know what to do with himself. "Would you like to know what time it is?" And I said, "Oh, I know what time it is. I just can't remember the words." and the orchestra were, what's going on up there? And the next night we got to that same spot, and I just paused dramatically before I said those lines, I thought I'd make their hearts beat a little faster and let them think I was going to do it again. And I said, "What a wonderful watch." And there was huge laughter from the pit.
You've dipped your toes into musical theatre as well, with the Mother Abbess in The Sound of Music.
Yes.
And Ida Strauss in Titanic.
Yes.
How different is music theatre performance? I mean, because you're doing 8 shows a week.
Well, it's performing.
Yeah.
But 8 shows a week, yes. Very tough. And I hadn't done it enough to hold back, but it didn't actually matter because they were not arduous vocally.
Right.
And Bob and I had this lovely duet in Titanic, and it ended up being almost the highlight of the show because very emotional.
Beautiful moment. It's the older couple,
That's
the
right.
Strausses
Yes.
on...
The Strauss is on the Titanic as
yes,
it's going down.
Yeah, saying goodbye to each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know, it turns out his body was found and he's buried in New York.
Mr. Strauss.
Mr. Strauss, but hers was not.
Right.
I feel very attached to those roles.
Yeah.
They were real people for me.
Yeah.
and wonderful performers. God, it was a fantastic cast, but it was undersold and it didn't do well, so it went off after about a month. And we were playing sometimes to 200 people. Soul destroying. But what a cast. And there was a big party at the director's... it was the home of the chap who was playing the captain. God, they were wonderful. And it was Mona Vale, I think it was. And he had a swimming pool, and I've got some shots of us all. And it was like belonging to a big, happy family.
Great.
Big cast.
Yep.
And the son of Michael Lewis... Alex. Oh, God, what a singer that boy is. Mm. And so his brother's different.
Ben.
Yeah. And he was Phantom of the Opera.
Love Never Dies.
And he did that... yes, I Love Never Dies too. And he's tall, and his brother's not. But his brother's got a fabulous voice. Yeah. Are you familiar? Hmm.
You must be chuffed that your voice is associated with one of the most iconic moments in one of the most iconic Australian films.
Absolutely.
Priscilla, Queen of the
For
Desert.
which I received nothing.
Really?
Not a bean. My daughter came home from seeing the premiere, which was in aid, I think, the Bobby Goldsmith Foundation.
Just to remind the listener, this is when the youngest drag queen, Felicia, is atop the bus.
That's right. Oh, who was that played?
Guy Pearce.
Guy Pearce.
As they're streaming through the desert.
And he's got the
silver
boa
case
is streaming out behind him.
And
I'm singing.
He's miming.
He's miming to A Forse Lui from Traviata, the first act, big Shana. Sempre libera di Dio, folleggiare di gioia in gioia. So, and Vita came home and said, "Guess what, Mum? You're in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert." I said, "Oh, really?" So I wrote to them and they said, "Would I like a free ticket?" I said, "Well, you'll be very pleased to know I can actually afford an $8 ticket."
Yeah.
That is not the question. It's a moral one. But I think, quite honestly, they used it because they didn't have to pay royalties. And of course, nobody knew it was going to be the big success it was.
No, not at all. Are you acknowledged in the credits?
Yes.
Oh,
it was sometimes.
Right.
I mean, I am acknowledged in the recording of the credits, but they don't always play the whole lot of them. Right. But I think I'm down for posterity now.
Yeah, right. Did you read reviews of your performances?
I used to until I encountered Australian reviews. And
not good reviewers, or?
No, not good reviewers, and biased and heartless. No connection with the artistic soul at all. So I had to stop reading them.
Yeah.
I once, after I had made my debut in Covent Garden, I came back, and one of the reviewers, I think it was Felix Werder, wrote in Melbourne, it said she said something like, I was singing, what was I singing? It might have been Parmina. I gilded the lily, which because I'd sung Gilda, and I said, you sacrificed the truth for a play on words. And so his wife rang me and said he would like to meet me and apologise. And I said, you can't undo what you've done.
Yeah.
I don't wish to speak to you.
Yeah.
And several times, I have had some wonderful reviews. And one loves that. And I thought, I can't have my season ruined by the memory of someone writing mostly unhelpful comments in the newspaper. I'm the judge of my performance.
Yeah.
And I do my best. And one can do no more than that.
Yeah. Are you superstitious in the theatre? Did you have an opening night ritual? Or?
No, not at all. I'm very pragmatic. I've got my Irish background, you see.
Started you in good stead.
Yes, so it is.
Have you thought of writing an autobiography?
I started it,
Yeah.
and I've gone into enormous detail about my early life because I don't think anybody really is familiar with that. So if anybody wants to take over and I don't finish it, they'll know some of it, but that I've written the stuff that people might not know. So I've got about 30 pages of that.
Well, that's a good start.
Yes.
Have you got a name for it?
No. Because it doesn't really matter, that.
Right. You were known as the People's Diva.
Yes, very nice.
Yeah?
I love that.
You love that?
Yes, I do.
Well, opera was originally written for the everyman, wasn't it?
It was.
It wasn't an elite art form.
No. Well, I think the people it was written for, they were probably not the lowest common denominator, the poorest.
Yeah.
Because I think it was Gluck wrote the first one. And that was a bit of a while ago.
Yes. Just a bit. Joan, it has been absolutely wonderful chatting to you this past hour. So thank you for your generosity of time and anecdote.
It's my pleasure.
I'm glad we've been able to
I'm
capture.
glad the memory didn't let me down.
I think it's pretty impressive, and the voice is not bad either.
Well, we're going to be 83 next week.
Really?
And on Verdi's birthday.
Yes, you share a birthday with Verdi, which is...
Yes, I mean, that's my greatest claim to fame.
Verdi's birthday.
Yeah.
I think there's some other things.
There's
which,
a rapport.
You can claim as...
I feel, but I mean, well, I think one of the great mysteries for me is how wonderfully Tchaikovsky represented Yevgeny Onegin in music. Because he speaks of love and passion, and he had a very complex personality. And he had Nadezhda von Meck, who was his patron, who was in love with him, and they never met.
The magic of music.
It's a most wonderful story, and I'm sort of conscious of that as I sing Puskай pogibnya na prezdye его слепительной надежде. That's the opening of the letters in.
Thanks, Joan.
Great pleasure.
What a privilege it was to have that access to the great Joan Carden. I'm sure, like me, you were spellbound by her recollections of a stellar career. I didn't know that hers was the voice we hear atop the bus in that iconic scene from Priscilla. Did you? My appreciation for this episode goes to Brian Castle's Onion and Desiree Records for suggesting the conversation with Joan and access to the great tracks of Joan in performance that you heard today. Like Stages, Brian is determined to preserve our arts heritage, and I alert you to his great Australian Voices series, available in a beautiful CD set, accompanied by a very informative pictorial booklet. The CD series celebrates a legion of great Australian singers like June Bronhill, Nance Grant, Robert Allman and Jennifer Eddy. I thoroughly recommend. You can find the CDs on eBay, yes that's right, or finding Brian Castle's Onion on Facebook and requesting the series from him there. We're off to Summer Bay in the next episode via Perth and the USA. I refer to Ditch Davey, who is presently playing Dr. Kristen Green in the iconic soap. But Ditch has arrived at home and away after lead roles in a succession of US TV dramas and starting his career as Constable Evan Jones on Blue Heelers. Ditch describes the rollercoaster ride of television series work as well as insightful investigation of the actor's craft. Join me next time with Ditch Davey. Thanks for joining us today. It's always a joy to have your company. I'm Peter Eyers, and you've been listening to the Stages podcast. Keep well, keep warm, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.